The wind came down off the mountains like something with teeth. Corwin Vile stood at the high window of Greywatch and listened to it. Snow had been falling since the middle of the afternoon. Now, long past midnight, it came so thick that the torches along the outer wall were only smears of gold drowning in white. No sane creature would be abroad in such a storm. Every wolf of the High Reach pack was behind stone and shuttered wood, close to a fire, grateful. Yet Corwin could not sit. His wolf had paced beneath his skin all evening, restless, uneasy, refusing every quiet word he offered it. This was not the storm. He had weathered 100 storms and slept soundly through most of them. This was something else. A pull low in his chest, as though a thread had been knotted there long ago, and now some hand out in the dark had begun to draw it tight. He had been an alpha king for 7 winters. He had learned to trust the thread before he understood it. So when the great bell at the gatehouse rang once, thin and broken beneath the howl of the wind, Corwin was already moving. By the time he reached the courtyard, his beta was ahead of him, cloak snapping, boots throwing up snow. Halvar was a mountain of a man, slow to alarm and slower to fear, and the look on his face stopped Corwin cold. "There is someone at the gate," Halvar said. "In this," Corwin answered. The word felt foolish in his mouth. "No one travels in this. Someone did." The outer gate of Greywatch was iron and blackened oak, tall as 3 men, and it had not been opened after dark in living memory without an alpha's word. Corwin gave the word. The bars groaned back. The wind rushed through the gap like a living thing, and there, in the small pool of torchlight beyond the threshold, a figure knelt in the snow. A woman. She was wrapped in a traveling cloak so soaked and frozen that it had gone stiff as armor. Her hair was plastered dark against her face. Her lips had lost their color. She had fallen to her knees because she could no longer stand, and still she had one arm wrapped tight across her body, shielding something, guarding it even now against the cold and the men and the world. Corwin crossed the distance before he knew he had moved. The moment he came near her, his wolf rose so hard and so fast that he nearly staggered. Not with hunger, not with the simple want a man feels looking at a beautiful woman. Something older than that. Something that felt absurdly like recognition, as though his wolf had been waiting at that gate its whole life, and only now understood why. Corwin had no name for it. He set it aside. There would be time. The woman lifted her head. Her eyes found his, and though she was half frozen and clearly near the end of her strength, they were not soft eyes. They measured him. They weighed the crown he did not wear and the power he could not hide, and they did not trust one grain of it. "One night," she said. Her voice was a cracked and ruined thing. "That is all I ask. Shelter from the storm. One night, and I swear to you on the moon I will be gone by dawn." Something in the way she said it made his wolf go still. "You will freeze before dawn if you go back out in that," Corwin said. "Then I will freeze after you have kept your fire an honest fire," she answered, "and I will trouble no one." She swayed. "Please, not for me." And then the bundle in her arms moved. Corwin went rigid. For one heartbeat he thought it was some animal she carried, or the last of her strength failing. Then a small hand appeared at the edge of the frozen cloak. Then a face. A child. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, with enormous solemn eyes and a smear of soot across one cheek, staring up out of the wool as though from the mouth of a cave. The girl looked at the walls. She looked at the torches, at the armed men, at the iron gate closing out the storm behind them. She looked at Corwin last and longest, and she did not cry. And somehow that was worse than crying. Her small mouth moved. "Are you the one," she whispered, "who sends the lost ones back?" The words landed somewhere beneath Corwin's ribs and stayed there. Behind him he heard Halvar draw a slow breath. He heard the murmur run through the gate guards. low and uneasy. Strangers. A woman and a child out of a killing storm, half dead, asking for one night and promising to be gone by first light. It made no sense. Every law of the season said, turn them out. It was the dark of the year, the feuding time, when no pack opened its doors to blood it did not know. Corwin looked at the child. He looked at the woman fighting with everything left in her to stay upright between him and that little girl. Gone by dawn, the woman said again, softer now, as if the promise were the only thing holding her together. I swear it. Before the sun. Before they come. Before who comes, Corwin said. But her eyes had already rolled back. The last of her strength went out of her all at once, and she folded forward into the snow, and the child cried out a single high, frightened sound, and Corwin caught them both before they struck the ground. He held them against his chest, one arm beneath the woman, one hand cradling the girl who now clung to him and to her mother at once. Her fingers twisted so hard into the frozen cloak that Corwin could not have pried them loose without breaking them. She weighed nothing, the woman. That frightened him more than the blood he could now smell beneath the snow and the cold. Fresh blood. Not much, but enough. Someone had hurt her, and not long ago, and she had walked through a mountain storm anyway with a child in her arms rather than stay wherever that hurt had found her. Corwin turned toward the keep. Your Majesty, one of the gate guards said carefully, the old law. Strangers, in the feuding dark. We do not know what follows them. Then we will learn, Corwin said. He did not raise his voice. He rarely needed to. But the guard fell silent, and the men stepped back, and Halvar fell in beside him without a word, the way he had for 20 years. The child had begun to shiver so violently that her teeth clicked. Corwin drew his own cloak around her small body as he walked. She flinched at the movement, then went still, watching him with those solemn eyes, deciding something a child should never have to decide, which was whether the large-armed stranger carrying her was a rescue or a trap. We are almost warm, he told her. It was the gentlest voice he owned, and he was not certain he had used it in years. Almost warm now. No one is sending anyone back tonight. The girl studied his face for a long moment. They always say that, she whispered. And then she pressed her face against her mother's frozen shoulder and said nothing more, and Corwin carried the two of them in out of the storm, and behind him the great iron gate of Greywatch swung shut against the dark, against the wind, against whatever it was the woman had sworn would come before the dawn. He did not yet know he had just locked the most dangerous thing in the mountains inside his own walls. He only knew that the thread in his chest had gone quiet at last, for the first time in an entire restless night, the moment he brought her through his door. They put the woman in the western guest chamber, the warmest room in Greywatch, with a fire built so high the healers complained of the heat. Corwin did not leave. He stood against the far wall with his arms folded and watched the pack healer work over the stranger by candlelight. Old Marta, a woman who had set his broken bones when he was a boy and delivered half the pack since then. She peeled back the frozen cloak and the layers beneath, and her mouth thinned to a hard line at what she found there. The child would not allow it at first. The moment the healers tried to lift her away from her mother, the little girl came apart. She did not scream in the way children scream for attention. She fought. She kicked and twisted and made a sound so raw and so terrified that every wolf in the room felt it in their teeth. And she reached back toward the unconscious woman with both hands as though letting go for a single moment would be the same as losing her forever. Let her stay, Corwin said. Your Majesty, one of the healers began. Let her stay. They let her stay. The girl climbed onto the edge of the great bed, took a fistful of her mother's sleeve in one small hand, and only then did the fight drain out of her. Only then did the terror ease from her scent. She sat there, rigid and watchful, a tiny sentinel guarding a fallen soldier, and she did not once take her eyes from the strangers in the room. Corwin found he could not look away from her. She was not what he had expected. Now that the snow had melted from her hair, he could see it was a deep and unusual red, the color of old copper, and her eyes were a pale and startling gray. Nothing in her face echoed the mother's dark coloring. Nothing in her face echoed his own. He did not know why he had half expected it to. He set the thought aside with all the others he had no room for tonight. Marta straightened at last. She drew Corwin toward the window, away from the child's sharp ears, and lowered her voice. "Speak," he said. "She has walked a long way, hurt," Marta said. "There is a wound along her side, days old, poorly closed. She has torn it open again more than once. And there are older marks, Your Majesty. Older than days. She has been living hard for a long time and running longer." "Running from what?" "I am a healer, not a seer," Marta said. "But a woman does not carry a child through the winter passes alone, unless what is behind her frightens her more than the mountain does. And the mountain, tonight, would frighten anyone." Corwin looked back at the bed. At the small red-haired girl keeping her watch. "Whose child is she?" he said. It was half to himself. The question moved through the room like a cold draft. He saw the healers glance at one another. He saw Halvar shift his weight by the door. It was the question all of them were holding, and none of them would ask aloud, because there was something in the pairing of that dark woman and that copper-haired child that did not sit flat, that suggested a story with pieces missing from the middle of it. No one answered him. He had not truly expected them to. That was when the door opened without a knock. Corwin knew who it was before he turned. There was only one person in all of Greywatch who came through his doors as though they were her own. His Aunt Venora entered the chamber with the unhurried grace of a woman who had governed the affairs of the pack for as long as Corwin had ruled it. She was tall and silver-haired and beautiful in the cold way of a winter morning, and she had raised him after the fever took his mother, and there was no one in the world he trusted more completely, or had, until the moment he watched her face when she saw the child. Venora stopped. It was the smallest thing. A single step. Arrested. A breath. Held one beat too long. Most people in the room saw nothing at all. But Corwin had spent his whole life reading this woman, and he saw the color leave her cheeks, and he saw her eyes fix on the little red-haired girl on the bed, with an expression he had never once seen his aunt wear. It was not distaste. He would have understood distaste. Strangers, in the feuding dark, brought into the heart of the pack against every custom. He would have expected her to be furious. It was not fury. It was fear. It was gone almost before it formed, smoothed away beneath the composed and gracious mask she wore like a second skin. But Corwin had seen it. His wolf had seen it too, and it lifted its head inside him, suddenly and sharply awake. "Corwin," Venora said, her tone perfectly level. "The whole keep is speaking of it. You have brought outsiders through the gate in the dark of the year. I have brought a wounded woman and a freezing child in out of a storm," he said. He was watching her very carefully now. "Would you have had me leave them to die on the stones?" "Of course not." Venora came further into the room, and Corwin noticed that for all her grace she did not go near the bed. She kept her distance from it the way one keeps distance from a fire that has already burned you once. "I would only have you remember what season it is. Strangers carry their troubles with them, my dear, and this one has clearly gathered a great many." Behind her, another figure had slipped into the doorway, Saris. She was everything Venora had spent 3 years grooming her to be. Noble-born, silver-tongued, lovely as a blade is lovely, and long promised in the quiet understandings of the court to be the Luna of High Reach when Corwin at last chose to take one. She wore her expectation like a jewel. Half the pack already called her lady when they thought no one important was listening. Corwin watched her eyes go to the child, and he saw the same thing there that he had seen in his aunt. Not jealousy, not the cool irritation a woman might feel finding a strange female installed in the alpha's warmest chamber. He looked for that, and did not find it. He found fear. The same fear, as if the two of them were looking not at a lost little girl, but at a ghost. What it is, he thought. What do you see that I do not? The child stared back at the two elegant women in the doorway. Slowly, deliberately, she gathered a larger fistful of her mother's sleeve, and she pressed herself closer to the unconscious woman's side, and she watched Venora and Saris with the flat and ancient wariness of a creature that has already learned exactly which shapes in the dark are dangerous. She had not looked at Corwin that way. She had not looked at the healers or the guards that way. Only at them. Interesting, his wolf said, in the wordless way it spoke to him. Venora recovered herself first, as she always did. She turned from the bed with a smooth and sorrowful smile that did not reach her eyes, and she laid a light hand on Corwin's arm, and she said, in the gentle voice she had used to soothe him as a boy, "You have a soft heart tonight, nephew. See that it does not cost you by morning." Then she swept from the room, and Saris went with her, and the door closed behind them. And Corwin Vale stood in the sudden quiet, watching a frightened child guard a dying stranger, and felt, for the first time in many years, that everyone in his own house knew something he did not. He crossed to the bed at last and lowered himself into the chair beside it. The child tensed. He expected that now. He made himself small the way a man does for a wild thing, elbows on his knees, hands open and empty, gaze soft and turned half away. "I am not going to touch her," he said quietly, "and I am not going to touch you. I only wanted to sit down. It has been a long night for the both of us." The girl said nothing, but after a while, when he did not move, some fraction of the stiffness went out of her small shoulders. His gaze settled on the sleeping woman. Even wrecked by cold and pain, even gray in the lips and hollow at the cheek, there was something about her face that his wolf would not stop circling. He kept returning to the strangeness of the moment at the gate. That surge of knowing, that certainty, wordless and complete, that he had found something he had not known was lost. He had felt it once before, he realized, and could not place when. "What is your mother called?" he asked the child. For a long moment he thought she would not answer. Then, in a whisper so faint he almost missed it beneath the crackle of the fire, she said, "You are not supposed to know." Corwin turned his head. "Why not?" he asked, as gently as he could. The girl looked at him with those pale gray eyes, far too old for her small face. "Because names are how they find you," she said. And she lay down against her mother's side and closed her eyes, and would say no more. Corwin sat with them until the fire burned low, and the storm screamed against the shutters, and somewhere below him in the sleeping keep, two elegant women he had trusted his whole life were awake behind a closed door, speaking in voices too quiet to carry, of a child they had gone white to see. Corwin did not mean to fall asleep in the chair. He woke to gray light and the sound of the storm gone quiet, and to Marta's hand on his shoulder, and to the strange still weight of a warning she had not yet spoken. "Your Majesty," she said, "come away from the child a moment. There is something you must see." The little girl was asleep at last, curled into the curve of her mother's body, one small hand still fisted in the sleeve. Corwin rose carefully. Marta drew him toward the fire and, when they were far enough that no sleeping ear would catch it, she turned his own hand palm up and pressed something into it. It was a scrap of cloth, part of the child's underthings, cut away and washed clean of the road. And worked into the hem of it, in thread so fine it might have been mistaken for damage, was a small and deliberate mark, a sigil. 3 crescents turned inward around a single point, like moons falling toward a heart. Corwin's blood went cold. He knew that mark. He had seen it once, years ago, on the banners of a pack that held the wet green valleys 2 ranges to the south. A small pack, and an old one and a proud one. The Mirewood pack. "They are dead," he said. His voice did not sound like his own. "The Mirewood are dead." There was a sickness. A wasting fever ran through the southern valleys. 6 winters passed. The whole pack was lost to it. I sent grain south for the survivors and was told there were none. "I know what you were told," Marta said quietly. "I am telling you what I see. That mark is stitched by a Mirewood hand, in the old way, the way a mother marks a child too young to keep her own name. And it is stitched to hide, Your Majesty. Not to honor. Whoever sewed that meant for it to be found only if the child were washed by someone who already knew to look." Corwin closed his hand around the scrap. 6 winters. A wasting fever. His aunt had brought him that news herself. He remembered now, brought it gently, the way she brought all hard things, and told him there was no one left to grieve and nothing left to do. He had believed her. Why would he not have believed her? She had never in his life given him a reason to doubt a single word she spoke. And last night she had gone white to the lips at the sight of a red-haired child. A wasting fever did not put a wound in a woman's side. A wasting fever did not chase her through the winter passes. A wasting fever did not teach a 6-year-old that names are how they find you. "Someone is hunting this child," Corwin said slowly. "And they have been hunting her a long time. That was no random cruelty in the woman's side. Someone did that on purpose, and someone means to finish it." Marta said nothing. She did not need to. He watched the same conclusion sit heavy in her old eyes. If the Mirewood pack had truly died of fever, then the woman and the child sleeping in his warmest bed were impossible. And if they were not impossible, then everything he had been told about the death of an entire pack was a lie, and the lie had been carried to him by the one person he had never thought to question. Corwin turned to the window. Outside, the snow lay blue and endless in the dawn, and the passes were closed, and somewhere out there, if the child spoke true, something was coming that a desperate woman had sworn would arrive before the sun. The sun was rising now. He had locked the gates against it. He was suddenly, fiercely glad that he had. A sound behind him. A sharp, indrawn breath. Corwin turned. The woman was awake. She had come awake all at once, the way the badly hunted do, without the soft confusion of ordinary waking. Her eyes were open and already moving, cataloging the unfamiliar room, the fire, the height of the windows, the distance to the door. He watched her find her own body and take swift, painful inventory of its hurts. He watched her find the child at her side, and for one unguarded instant something broke open in her face, something so raw and so tender that Corwin had to look away from it, because it did not belong to him to see. Then she found Corwin, and the tenderness closed like a door slammed shut. She moved before he could speak. She got herself between her body and the child in a single motion despite the wound, one arm sweeping the little girl behind her, and she pressed her back to the headboard and faced him the way a cornered animal faces the thing that cornered it. Not with fear, with fury held so tight it had become a kind of calm. "Where am I?" she said. "You are safe," Corwin said. It was the wrong thing. He knew it the instant it left him. Her eyes went to the fine stone of the walls, to the crest carved above the hearth, the running wolf of High Reach, and he saw her read it, and he saw her understand exactly whose house she had begged her way into, and whatever color the fever had left her drained away entirely. "You are the Alpha King," she said. It was not a question. "You are Corwin Vale." "I am," he said. She laughed. It was a terrible sound, cracked and hollow and without a grain of humor in it. "Of all the doors in all the mountains," she said, half to herself, "I crawled to yours." "You crawled to shelter in a killing storm," Corwin said. He kept his voice even, though something in her contempt had reached in and closed a fist around his chest. "My gate was the nearest that would open. There is no shame in that." "Shame," she repeated softly. Her eyes came back to him, and they were bright now, too bright. "You would know nothing about shame. Kings never do." Corwin had been an Alpha King for 7 winters. Armies had broken against his name. Grown warriors dropped their gaze when he entered a room. He could not remember the last time a person had looked at him the way this woman looked at him now, with a loathing so complete and so personal that it seemed to have been years in the building. A loathing that belonged not to a stranger but to someone he had wronged in some terrible way he could not remember. He had never seen her before in his life. He was certain of it. And still his wolf whined low in his chest at the sight of her hatred, actually whined, the way it had not done since he was a pup, and Corwin felt the ridiculous and unbearable weight of a guilt he could not name and had not earned. "What is your name?" he asked. "Why?" She drew the child more tightly behind her. "So it can be written in your ledgers. So your people know which grave to dig. No one here is digging any graves." "You are the crown of the North," she said. "Do not tell me what your kind does and does not do. I have seen it." The words hung in the room. "I have seen it." Corwin turned them over and found no bottom to them. He thought of the scrap of cloth in his fist. 3 crescents falling toward a heart. He thought of the wasting fever that had never happened, and the pack that had never died of it, and the ant who had gone white at a doorway. He opened his hand and let her see the mark. The effect was immediate and total. The woman's breath stopped. Her gaze locked onto the small stitched sigil, and every ounce of her fury curdled in a heartbeat into something far worse, into terror, into grief, into the particular horror of a person who has spent years keeping a secret and watches it lie exposed in an enemy's palm. "Where you got that?" she whispered. "From your daughter's clothing," Corwin said, "from a Meyerwood hand, from a pack the whole North believes died of fever 6 winters ago." He held her eyes. "I begin to think it did not." For a moment she did not move. The child peered out from behind her, silent, watching the mark in the Alpha King's hand as though it were a live coal. Then the woman lifted her chin, and though her eyes were wet, she did not let a single tear fall, and she said, in a voice stripped down to bare and bleeding truth, "You want my name. It is Ondine. And the child is not the last thing your people tried to bury. She is only the last thing they failed to." Corwin stared at her. "Who tried to bury her?" he said. "Say it plainly." Ondine's mouth twisted. "You want me to say it plainly? In your house? In the seat of the North, with your own guards at the door?" She shook her head slowly. "You truly do not know. That is almost worse than if you did." "I know that a pack I was told died of fever did not," Corwin said. "I know that someone carried that lie to my table and I ate it whole. Help me and I will pull the truth up by the roots, whatever it is, whoever it touches." "Whoever it touches," she echoed. "And when the roots come up under your own floor, Alpha King, when the truth wears a face you love, what will your fine promises be worth then?" He had no answer. The scrap of cloth burned in his palm. "They will come," Ondine went on, quieter now, and the quiet was more frightening than her fury had been. "Not tonight. The passes bought me that much. But the snow will settle, and the passes will open, and a man will come up the southern road with 40 wolves at his back, and a claim he says the moon herself gave him. He has hunted us for years. He does not stop. And when he learns where we sheltered, he will not care whose gate it was." "Get us to the southern road," Ondine said. "Open your gate. Let us go, and forget you ever saw that mark, and you may keep your soft heart, and your clean hands, and your comfortable lies." She swallowed. "I told you I would be gone by dawn. It is dawn, Alpha King. Keep your word, and I will keep mine." He thought of the closed gate, of the blue and endless snow, of whatever was coming across it. "No," he said, and he watched the last of Ondine's composure break apart on that single word, and did not yet understand that he had just made the choice that would cost him everything he had ever called his own. Ondine did not leave by dawn. She could not. Fresh snow had sealed the passes waist deep, and her wound had torn again when she moved to shield the child, and Marta forbade the road with an authority that even an Alpha King did not argue with. So the woman who had sworn to be gone by first light stayed, hating every stone of the place that kept her, and Corwin found himself with days he had not expected and did not know what to do with. He told himself he visited the Western Wing for the investigation. There were questions the woman would not answer, doors she had closed the moment she understood whose house held her. A careful king gathered what he could. That was the reason he gave the guards, and Halvar, and himself, each morning as his feet carried him again down the long, cold gallery to a room he had no true business entering. It was a poor lie. It grew poorer by the day. The truth was that he went for the child. Nell did not trust him. She made that plain in 100 small ways, the way she froze when he entered, and the way she kept her mother's body between them like a wall. But she was 6 winters old and endlessly, helplessly curious, and a curious child cannot stay behind a wall forever. She had a game she played on the hearthstones. She gathered the smooth gray pebbles the servant swept from the river gravel, and she lined them up in careful rows, and she gave each one a task. This one watches the door. This one watches the window. This one is asleep, but only pretending. Corwin sat on the floor across from her one afternoon, too large for it, his knees near his ears, and he pointed at the smallest stone at the very front of the line. "And this one?" he asked. "What does this one do?" Nell considered it gravely. "That one goes first," she said. "So the others have time to run." Corwin was quiet for a moment. "That is a heavy task for the smallest stone," he said. Nell shrugged, the way children do when they are telling you something enormous and do not know it. "Somebody has to," she said. "Mama says the smallest one is always the bravest, because it knows." "Knows what?" "That it will not be there for the running part." She said it without a tremor, arranging her stones, and Corwin had to look into the fire for a while until his face was his own again. He learned things, sitting on that floor. He learned them the way you learn from a child, sideways, in pieces, dropped between other things and never meant as testimony. He learned that Ondine slept only when Nell held her hand, so that she would know in the dark that the girl had not been taken from her while she dreamed. He learned that they never stayed anywhere long enough to unpack the small bundle they carried, and that Nell knew the count of exits from every room she had ever slept in, because her mother had taught her to count them the way other children were taught their letters. Ondine watched these visits from her bed with the flat attention of a sentry. She did not thank him for the warmth, or the food, or the healers, or the fact that her child laughed again after what must have been a long silence. She watched him the way one watches a wolf that has not yet decided to bite. And Corwin, who had spent his whole life being thanked whether he deserved it or not, found her silence more honest than any courtier's praise, and more difficult to bear. Once, when Nell had fallen asleep at last across her mother's lap, he stayed longer than he meant to. The fire snapped, the snow ticked against the shutters. Ondine sat with one hand smoothing the child's copper hair, over and over, and did not look at him when she finally spoke. "You are trying to make her love you," she said. "Do not." "I am carving birds for a lonely child," Corwin said. "There is no strategy in it. There is always a strategy in it." Now her eyes did come to him, dark and tired and unforgiving. Men like you do not give a thing away. You lend it. And then one day, when it suits you, you come to collect, and the price is always higher than the gift was worth. She looked back down at the sleeping girl. I will not let her learn to need this room, because we are going to leave it. And I will not watch her cry for a warmth you will take back the moment we are no longer useful or interesting to you. Corwin was quiet a long moment. You speak as if you know me, he said. I know you're kind, she said. You keep saying that. His voice stayed low even, but something underneath it had begun to ache. I have wronged you. I hear it in every word you give me. You look at me and you see a debt owed in blood, and I cannot for the life of me remember signing it. He leaned forward. So tell me plainly, Ondine, what did the Alpha King of the North do to you? For one heartbeat he thought she would answer. Her jaw worked. Her hand went still on the child's hair. Something moved behind her eyes, vast and terrible and years in the deep. Then Nell stirred in her sleep and murmured, and Ondine's whole body curved instinctively around the small sound, and the moment shut like a fist. Go to your council, Alpha King, she said. That is what kings are for. He went. But at the door his wolf turned him back for one last look, the way it always did in that room now, unwilling to leave, and he found her watching him go with an expression that was not hatred at all. It was gone the instant she saw him catch it. But for that one instant it had looked, impossibly, like grief. And once, only once, he learned the thing that changed everything. He had brought Nell a carved bird, a little wren he had shaped himself with a knife over 2 evenings. Clumsy work, but honest. She turned it over and over in her small hands with the solemn joy of a child who is not often given things. Then she pointed at the running wolf stitched into the breast of his tunic, the crest of high reach, gray on dark. I know that shape, she said. Corwin did not move. Do you? Nell nodded. The bad men wore your color, she said. On their chests. Like you. She traced the wolf with one small finger, thoughtful, unafraid, as though describing weather. Mama says I dreamed it, but I did not dream it. They came in the dark, and they wore your color, and afterward the whole valley was fire. The room seemed to tilt. Corwin did not let it show. He had ruled too long to let a child see the ground open beneath a man. But something cold and enormous moved through him, because a 6-year-old does not invent the color of a killer's coat, and the color she named was his own. Somebody wore his crest into the Mirewood Valley 6 winters ago. Somebody carried the running wolf of High Reach into a pack he had been told died quietly of fever, and left it burning behind them. He had not sent them. He knew, with the bone-deep certainty a man has about his own hands, that he had never signed such a thing. But someone had worn his name into that valley, and the North believed a lie about it, and the lie had been placed in his own mouth by a hand he trusted. Mama does not like me to talk about the fire, Nell said, watching his face now with a flicker of worry. Are you angry? No, Corwin said. His voice came out rough. Not at you. Never at you. Good, said Nell, satisfied, and went back to her wren. He was still sitting on that floor, turning the child's words over like stones in his own hand, when the door opened without a knock, and Ceres came in. She had never come to this wing before. She stood in the doorway in silks meant for a hall, entirely wrong for a sick room. And she looked at the Alpha King sitting on the ground beside a servant's child with an expression she could not quite keep off her lovely face. We are looking for you everywhere, she said. The council has been waiting since the noon bell. She let her gaze travel over the pebbles, the carved bird, and the whole small domestic scene of it. This is where you have been. On the floor. With her. Corwin rose without hurry. Is there something you needed, Ceres? The spring moon is 6 weeks out, she said. Her voice was pleasant and her eyes were not. The pack expects a Luna standing beside you when it rises. Arrangements do not make themselves. And instead of the council, instead of me, the Alpha King of the North spends his days playing nursemaid to a stray woman and her whelp. Have a care, Corwin said quietly. Why? Saris laughed, a bright, cold sound. Because I named her a stray. That is all she is. A beggar who talked her way through your gate and now sinks her claws into your soft season. The child, she added. And here her voice did something strange, tightened and thinned. That child should never have been brought inside these walls at all. Corwin looked at her. There it was again. The same note he had seen in his aunt at the doorway, in Saris herself that first night. The thing that was not jealousy, and had never been jealousy. Fear. Even now, even furious, when Saris spoke of the child, her eyes moved to Nell and something in them flinched. Why? He said. Saris blinked. Why what? Why should she never have been brought inside? She is a child of 6. She has done nothing but survive a winter road. Yet you fear her. My aunt fears her. 2 of the strongest women in the North go pale at the sight of a little girl playing with river stones, and neither of you will tell me why. He took a step toward her. So tell me now, Saris, what is it about that child that frightens you? For one instant her composure cracked all the way through, and he saw beneath it something he had never expected to find in her, which was not malice, but terror. The raw, undefended terror of a person watching a locked door swing slowly open. Then she gathered herself and smiled, and gave him nothing. You care so much, she said softly, for a woman you met 3 days ago in the snow. Have you asked yourself why, my king? Has that ever once troubled you? And she left him there, and the question stayed behind, and it troubled him very much. Because he did not know why. He only knew that when he pictured Ondine walking out through his gate onto the southern road, toward the 40 wolves and the man who did not stop, something inside him rose up snarling and refused it entirely. He did not understand the feeling. He no longer cared to. Whatever it was, it had decided him. He was not going to let her go. And he was going to learn who had worn his color into the Mirewood Valley and burned it, and lied to him for 6 winters about the ashes, whatever it cost, whoever it touched. She tried to run on the 9th night. Corwin should have expected it. The snow had eased. A single pass to the south had opened a hand's width, enough for a desperate woman who counted exits in her sleep. He woke to Halvar shaking his shoulder and the word escape already in the air, and he was in the courtyard in his shirt sleeves before he had fully understood the cold. They had stopped her at the inner gate. Of course they had. She had a wounded side and a sleeping child bound to her back, and half the mountain still against her, and she had tried it anyway, because the alternative was to stay another day inside the house of the man she believed had burned her world. When Corwin reached her, she was not fighting the guards. She had gone still in their hands, and Nell was awake and crying against her shoulder, and Ondine was staring at Corwin across the torchlit snow with a look of pure and furious despair. Let us go, she said. You promised. By dawn. You gave your word at this very gate. I said no, Corwin answered. Then you are a liar like all the rest of them. The words cracked out of her, and behind them, at last, came the thing she had held for 6 winters. You want to know what your kind did to me? She said. Her voice rose, ragged, unstoppable now, and the courtyard fell silent around it. Then hear it. 6 winters ago, I lived in the Mirewood Valley. My father was its alpha. My sister was its heir, and she had just borne a daughter, the first child of the next generation, and for one season we were the happiest pack in the whole green South. And then men came in the night wearing the running wolf of High Reach on their chests. They said there was a sickness. They said they came to help. She was shaking now. Nell had gone quiet, the terrible practiced quiet of a child who has heard this before. They barred the doors of the great hall from the outside, Undine said, with my father and my sister and half the pack inside it. And they set it alight, and they stood in a ring in the snow and made certain no one came out. And then they rode north and told your king a story about a fever. And your king believed it, or was glad to. And the north lit no candles for us, because the north was told there was no one left to mourn. Corwin could not speak. I carried my sister's daughter out through the root cellar with the smoke in my lungs, she said. She was 3 months old. I have run with her every day since. I have not slept a whole night in 6 winters, and every place we hid they found us always, as though they could smell her, until I understood that they would never stop. Because as long as one Mirewood child breathes, the lie your house told can still be pulled up by the roots. She lifted her chin. So no, Alpha King. I will not thank you for your fire and your broth. You want to know why I hate you. It is because you wear the color they wore. That is all you have ever been to me, the color of the men who barred the door. Corwin stood in the falling snow and felt each word go into him like a nail. He wanted to tell her she was wrong. He wanted to say that the north he ruled did not bar doors and light them, that no order of his had ever ridden south, that whatever monster wore his crest into her valley had done it without his knowledge, and against everything he believed himself to be. But he could not say it, because a colder voice inside him had already begun asking the questions a king should have asked 6 winters ago. Who had brought him the news of the fever? Who had counseled him to send grain and ask no further? Who had governed the southern marches in his name while he was young and learning to carry a crown too heavy for him? He knew the answer to all 3. It was the same answer. And he had called it family every day of his life. The courtyard was utterly silent. Nell, Corwin said, and could not keep his voice steady. She is not your daughter. She is my daughter in every way that the moon counts, Undine said fiercely. She has no one else living. I am her mother because I chose to be, in the smoke, with everything else on fire. She is the last of the Mirewood line, and she is worth more than your crown and your council and your spring moon Luna altogether, and I would burn the whole north down again myself before I let your house finish what it started. Corwin looked at the child, the copper hair, the pale gray eyes that were nothing like Undine's, and everything, he now understood, like a murdered heir's, the smallest stone, the one that goes first so the others have time to run. He turned and walked out of the courtyard without a word, and Undine took it for the coldness of a king caught in his crime, and could not have been more wrong. He walked because if he stayed he would have shown her a face no king shows his people, and because his wolf had risen so high and so hard in his chest that he did not trust his own voice. It was not raging. That was the worst of it. It had gone past rage into something quiet and vast and final, the stillness of a river the moment before the ice gives way. He passed servants who bowed and did not see them. He passed the door of the council chamber where his aunt would sit smiling in the morning and did not stop. He needed a thing colder than a child's memory and truer than a woman's grief. He needed proof he could hold in his own 2 hands, and he knew exactly where a king's proofs were kept. He went to the archive. Every order an Alpha King ever sealed was kept in the deep rooms beneath Greywatch, in oak chests, in his own wolf mark pressed into wax. 6 winters ago he had been a young king only lately come to the throne, and his aunt had governed half the north in his name while he learned to carry it. He had signed what she set before him. He had trusted the hand that guided his own. He worked through chest after chest by the light of a single lamp, past treaties and grain tallies and border judgments, 6 winters of a young king's rule laid out in wax and ink. His hands did not shake. He would not let them. He told himself, with each chest he closed, that he would find nothing, that the child had dreamed the color after all, that his aunt was only a hard woman and not a murderer, and he did not believe himself for a single breath of it. It took him until the dead hours to find it. A single order, 6 winters old. The wax bore his running wolf, clean and perfect. The words above it commanded the ceiling of the Mirewood Valley against the spread of a wasting fever, the containment of all souls within, and the burning of the infected halls. It was signed in his name. It was written in his aunt's hand. And Corwin knew, holding it, with a certainty that hollowed him out entirely, that he had never in his life set his seal to those words. She had used his mark. She had used his name, his color, his crown, his trust. She had turned the whole authority of the North into a torch and put it to a valley of sleeping families, and she had come to him afterward with sorrowful eyes and told him gently that there had been a fever and nothing to be done and no one left to grieve. Beneath the order, folded small, was one more thing: a scrap of scorched cloth, a banner corner, saved, and worked into it, in thread gone brown with smoke, 3 crescents turning inward around a single point, moons falling toward a heart, the mark of the Mirewood pack. His aunt had kept a piece of the thing she burned, the way some monsters keep a token, and she had kept it here, beneath the forged order, where only she was ever meant to look. Corwin knelt on the cold stone of the archive with the scorched banner in one hand and the false order in the other, and at last the whole shape of it came down on him all at once, complete, unbearable. The pack that never died of fever, the child his own house had hunted for 6 winters across every hiding place in the North, the woman his wolf had known at the gate the instant it saw her, known the way it had never known Saris, never known anyone, because whatever fate meant her to be to him, his own aunt had set fire to it before he ever learned her name. He thought of every kindness she had ever shown him, the nights she sat with him when the fever took his mother, the steady hand on his shoulder at his crowning, the patience with which she had taught a frightened boy to be a king. He had believed all of it. He believed, kneeling there, that some of it had even been real, and somehow that made it worse rather than better, because it meant the woman who loved him and the woman who burned the Mirewood in his name were the same woman, and had always been, and he had never once seen the seam. He thought of Ondine carrying an infant out through a root cellar with her lungs full of smoke, of 6 winters of counted exits, of a child taught that the smallest stone goes first so the others can run. All of it his, all of it done beneath his running wolf, with his wax, with his trust for kindling. He had locked the gates that first night to keep the danger out. He understood now, kneeling in the dark, that he had locked it in 6 winters ago, and it had been sitting at his table ever since, pouring his wine, guiding his hand, calling him nephew, and pale with terror every single day that a red-haired child might still be alive to say the word fire out loud. Dawn found him climbing back to the western wing with the forged order folded against his heart. He did not go in. He stood in the doorway in the gray light and looked at them. Ondine had fallen asleep at last, upright, her back to the headboard, one hand still knotted in the child's copper hair even in sleep. Nell lay curled against her with the little carved wren tucked under her chin. They looked, the two of them, like something that had been running so long it had forgotten how to stop. Corwin Vale made his choice in that doorway, in silence, without waking them. The spring moon would rise within weeks. There would be a ceremony in the great hall, and the whole North would gather to watch their king take a Luna, exactly as his aunt had planned it for years. Good. Let them gather. Let every pack of the North stand witness. They would not see the joining she had arranged. They would see the truth she had buried. But first he had to be certain of more than a single forged order, and he had to keep 2 people alive inside a house that had already killed for the secret they carried. So he would say nothing yet. He would wear his own face at his own table and let his aunt believe her nephew was still the boy she had raised to sign whatever she set before him. It would be the hardest thing he had ever done, and he would do it, because the alternative was to move too soon and lose them both. And when it was over, one way or another, no one would ever bar a door on a Meyerwood child again. Corwin wore his own face through the weeks that followed, and it nearly broke him. He sat at council beside his aunt and let her guide the talk as she always had. He let Sheris speak of the spring moon and did not contradict her. He gathered his proofs in the dark and hid them where no hand but his could reach, and each of them was another stone in the wall he was building, quietly, around the two people in his western wing. Halvar, he told, because a king needs one honest blade that knows the truth, no one else. The hardest part was Ondine, who believed him her enemy still and whom he could not undeceive without endangering her. She thought his silence was guilt. He let her think it. It was the only shield he had to give her, and it cost him more than she would ever know to wear the very coldness she despised. Then, 3 nights before the spring moon, Halvar came to him, gray-faced. "Riders on the southern road," he said, "coming up through the open pass, 40 of them, near enough. They carry the black fang of the Iron Fang pack. And your majesty, they ride as men ride who have been told exactly where to go." "Varek," Corwin said. "He does not stop," Ondine had told him at the gate. And now Corwin understood the last piece of it. The piece that turned his quiet river to killing ice. Someone in this house had sent word south the moment a red-haired child came through the gate. Someone had told the hunter where his quarry had gone to ground. His aunt had not merely burned the Meyerwood. She had spent 6 winters keeping the fire lit. The spring moon rose full and white over Greywatch, and the great hall filled with every pack of the north. They came in their finery to see their king take a Luna. Banners hung the length of the hall. The elders stood in their circle. Karis waited at the foot of the dais in silver, radiant, certain, a woman one moment from everything she had been promised. And at the high seat sat Venora, silver-haired and serene, the architect of it all, watching her long design come to its flower. Corwin rose. The hall hushed. He let the silence stretch until it had weight, until every wolf in the north leaned toward him. Then he spoke, and his voice carried to the farthest stone. "Before the moon," he said, "a king owes his people the truth. So I will give you one you have been denied for 6 winters." He looked down at Saris, and then up at his aunt. "There will be no joining tonight." The hall broke into noise. Venora's serene face did not move, but Corwin was watching her hands, and he saw them close slowly on the arms of her chair. "6 winters ago," he said, over the rising voices, "you were told the Meyerwood pack died of a wasting fever. You lit no candles. You were told there was no one left to mourn." He drew the forged order from his breast and held it up so the wax caught the moonlight. "That was a lie. This is the order that sealed their valley and burned their hall with the pack inside it. It bears my seal." He paused. "I never wrote it." Silence now, the dangerous kind. "It was written in my name by the hand that governed the South for me when I was young," Corwin said. "The hand I trusted above all others." He turned fully toward the high seat. "Tell them, Aunt, you have kept the truth 6 winters. Surely you can carry it a few breaths longer." Venora rose. She did not deny it. That was the thing Corwin would remember. She looked out over the shocked faces of the north, and she lifted her chin, and she spoke as a woman entirely certain she had done right. "Everything I did for this house," she said, cold and clear and unashamed. "The Meyerwood carried the elder blood. Their line held a claim older than yours, nephew, and a daughter of that line was moon-fated to your father's house, a mate you could not choose against. A Luna I could not counsel, could not guide, could not control. She would have taken you from me and the north from my hand within a season. She was a fire waiting to happen. So I put it out before it caught. She said it as simply as that. I made you strong. I made you safe. I gave you a Luna you could rule beside instead of one who would rule you, and I asked nothing but that you never learn the cost. And the child, Corwin said. His voice shook. The child you have hunted for 6 winters, the girl whose refuge you sold to Varek the very night she reached my gate, so that even now his wolves ride up my road to finish a child of 6. For the first time, Venora's composure flickered. As long as one of them breathes, she said, the fire is not out. I have never once in my life left a thing half done. Not even, her eyes cut to Corwin, this. Ondine stood at the side of the hall where Corwin had asked her to wait, one hand on Nell's shoulder, and every eye in the north turned to see the woman and the child that had been named. Corwin came down from the dais. He crossed the whole silent length of the hall, and he stopped before them, and in front of every pack of the north he went down on one knee before a servant woman and a copper-haired girl. I cannot give you back what my house took, he said. Only Ondine could hear it. And Nell. Not your father. Not your sister. Not one of the 6 winters you ran. I know that. I will not insult you by pretending otherwise. But I know now what my wolf knew at the gate, and I should have trusted it the first night. He looked up at her. You were never a stray who talked her way through my door. You are what my aunt burned a valley to keep from me, and I am done being ruled by the fire she lit. He rose and turned to the hall, and his voice rang out to the rafters. I take no Luna arranged by the hand that betrayed this throne. Saris made a small broken sound, and Corwin did not look at her, for she had known. He was certain of it now. She had always known. Venora Vial, you are stripped of your name, your seat, and your place in the north. You will answer to the packs for the Mirewood dead. And you, he said, to the doors, to the night, to the 40 wolves he knew were nearly at his gate. You who ride up my southern road to finish a child, hear the Alpha King of the North. The gate of Greywatch is shut. It will not open for you. Come and break yourself upon it. He gave the order that night that he had given once before, on a storm-dark evening that felt a lifetime ago. He locked the gates. But this time he did it not to shelter a stranger for a single night. He did it to stand for a family he had chosen and would not surrender. Against the hunter and the traitor and the whole long lie, until dawn and after dawn, and every dawn there was. Varek broke himself upon those gates. The packs of the north, who had lit no candles for the Mirewood 6 winters ago, stood at Corwin's wall that night and lit them all at once. And by morning the Black Fang was scattered, and the man who did not stop had stopped at last. Venora was given to the judgment of the elders. Saris fled north in the dark and was not pursued, for she was, in the end, only a small and frightened piece in a game far larger than herself. Forgiveness did not come like the dawn after the battle. It came slower than that, and it was harder won. Ondine did not fall into his arms because he had knelt in a hall. 6 winters do not close because a king says a true word at last. She stayed in the western wing, and she watched him. And this time what she watched for was whether the man matched the moment, day after ordinary day, when no one was gathered to see it. He matched it. He learned her. He learned that she took her tea bitter and slept badly and laughed, when she finally laughed, like something surprised out of her. He learned Nell first in truth, because the child forgave more easily than the woman, and because Corwin found he could refuse the girl nothing. He was there for the first steps he had already missed and could not have back, and he grieved that quietly and did not let her see. He carved her a whole flock of birds. He taught her that she need not keep watch on the doors anymore, because now there was a wall, and men to hold it, and a king who would stand in the gap himself before he let one more Mirewood child learn what running was. There was an evening, weeks after the battle, when Nell fell asleep between them by the fire in the middle of a story, one small hand in her mother's, and one, without either of them quite noticing when it had happened, in his. Corwin did not move for a long time, for fear of waking her. When he looked up, Undine was watching him across the sleeping child, and she was not guarding anything at all. Neither of them spoke, but something passed between them in the firelight that had no need of words, and Corwin understood that the smallest stone had found, at last, a place where she would never have to go first again. And one evening, when the spring had come in truth, and the snow was gone from the passes for good, Undine found him on the wall at dusk, and stood beside him, not quite touching, and looked out over the green south where her valley lay. "I do not forgive you," she said. "Not all of it. Perhaps not ever all of it." "I have not asked you to," Corwin said. "I know." She was quiet a moment. "That is why I am still here." And she let her hand rest against his on the cold stone, only that, only for a breath, and it was not the end of 6 winters of grief. But it was the beginning of something, and after so long a darkness, even a beginning felt like a miracle. Thank you for staying with me to the end of this story. I hope Corwin and Undine and little Nell found a way into your heart the way they found their way into mine, out of the snow and the long dark, and home at last. If this tale moved you, take a moment to like this video, to subscribe, and to turn on your notifications so that you never miss the next journey we take together beneath the moon. And before you go, I would love to know where in the world you are listening from tonight. Tell me your country, your city, or simply your corner of the world in the comments below, because it always warms my heart to see how far our little pack has spread. Until we meet again, be gentle with yourselves. Keep a light burning for the ones still finding their way home, and may the moon watch over every step of your path.